Chapter 2, which I entitled Phase 2, Sunny Side Up, and I open it with a couple of lines from Cat Stevens' Foreigner Suite, Over to That Sunny Side Road. About a week after the 4th, I woke up nude in Ched's arms. Now I could say bluebirds or even love doves were singing, and my heart fluttered like a hyperventilating mosquito. But I try not to lie. Usually. My heart beat fast only because Ched's radio alarm woke me. It buzzed between those zizzing sounds so popular on electronics back then when radio waves became stuck between two stations, one of which played a song by the Cat. Ched snored, humming like a locust with a bad case of hay fever, and I was glad. This gave me a chance to sneak out of his place before he saw me. A weird sequence of events led me into this position of sleeping in this guy's bed. Ched was not the culmination of the man I sought. His yellow beard was unkempt, pan-like. No, that's too poetic. His beard resembled more of a toilet brush, one of the prickly ones, the spiky ones that twist into a circle. But instead of a hole in the middle, there was a fat cherub face. His physique was no more alluring than that cherub face surrounded by brush. He was built like an overgrown daddy longlegs, but he didn't move as gracefully as the spider. And of course he had only 2 legs. Although he'd acted enamored with me, it also boasted about himself as if he were some mountain god, or perhaps Thor. Clutching a beer as if it were some sort of rosary, he'd pull it close to his chest and tilt up his chin and grunt, "I hate to brag, but I'm a phenomenal skier." Or he'd say, "I'm like the mountains. They look different every time you see them, just like me." He also bragged that photos he'd shot with his 35mm Nikon had been published in a local newspaper. But the truth was he had some unfair advantages. Born in Boulder to 2 skiing parents, he started skiing when he was 3 years old. He also worked for Boulder's only newspaper as an elevated paper boy, which helped him get pics published, I'm sure. Although he strutted when he walked as if he were Robert Redford, he was gangly and a poverty-stricken college student, just 22 years old. Plus, his sense of style was strange. He wore a bunch of weird scarab rings. Always. His blue eyes glittered like aspen leaves in autumn when he showed me one of those rings. "Look," he whispered while he lifted his chin like an Ivy League professor. "This one's from the era of King Edward II. Edward was a neo-Egyptologist who was into the occult." He seemed to read my skeptic mind when he looked at my eyes. "Seriously," he added. I looked at the silver ring. It sported an ugly gargoyle with oversized nostrils and pointed teeth. I was almost certain Ched was lying. I figured he'd told the truth, though, when he announced ancient Egyptians wore scarab rings and worshipped beetles. Egyptians were into weird trips, so it's likely they'd worship a scarab, that beetle pushing around a little ball of dung, and the Egyptians thought that the scarab was magic. But I didn't. When Ched slipped one of those dung ball rings onto my finger, I shook it off, pronto. Nevertheless, trying to shake myself from his spidery arms was tricky that morning. First, I slid out my left arm from under him and grabbed the waterbed frame. Then I pulled downward with that arm, bent my knees, and scooted toward the foot of the bed. The mattress rippled with shallow waves. I scooted again. I almost reached the footboard when the liquid inside the vortex mattress sloshed loudly under the sheets. "Ah!" Ched growled. Waves slapped against his back. I lie still. The bed rippled again. If I tried scooching again, I'd swish the bed into a tidal wave, I was sure. Simultaneously, I feared the radio's buzzes might wake Ched too, so I decided to click the cat temporarily out of my life. I had to get out of there pronto to arrive to work on time. It was 7:15 a.m. I had to be home by 7:30, by work by 8 at the latest. A loose schedule it wasn't. At least fate was with me, sorta. The previous night, Ched had swigged about 20 million beers, and his body literally lay anesthetized like a patient etherized or capsized upon a table. Only this table kept moving. I wasn't sure how many waves it'd take to wear off the anesthesia, too. So I clicked my inner genius in the ribs to rouse him into helping by coming up with a better plan for my quick exit. Finally, he did. I just followed the flow, so to speak, and rolled out of bed onto the floor. I started to lift the arm of Ched's that harnessed me when I felt a sneeze coming on. I sucked in my breath. Sneezes seem to itch inside your nose as if they're teams of fleas wearing cleats to play baseball. I conjured all my mental energy to force those fleas into a timeout. It almost worked, but I toward the end of the first inning, I just didn't think I could hold on any longer. I dropped Ched's arm just in time to stuff my nose into a pillow. Then I rained out the game. The bed rolled into waves again. Ched rolled back toward me and plopped his arm back over my hips. So on the second try, I lifted his arm smoothly, folding it back gently into his chest. His eyes blinked. I squeezed his hand. He opened his eyes an instant, then smiled and closed them. I quit moving. When his nostrils buzzed again, I twisted my bod to the left, inching but a millimeter at a time. Then I swirled into an eastern whirl, such as I'd learned in high school. I flipped gently over the side of the mattress. At first, I figured the only complication I'd encountered was I'd cracked my hip bone on the bed frame. But it was worse. When I was about to land on the red oriental carpet, Ched's fuzzy gray cat slipped underneath me. No way could I stop my flowing eastern roll, so this cat patted my fall. Meow, meow, the cat shrieked. It whisked out from under me and batted my face as if I were an oversized rodent. The sweet pet also had claws. It was the first cat fight I'd been in. Nevertheless, I didn't want revenge. I wanted to keep the beast quiet. It was indeed irate, and it wouldn't quit clawing me. By the time I hit the floor, my face smarted, and I was certain I wouldn't need rouge for a long time with the colors that feline streaked on my visage. I tried gently, I repeat gently, grabbing its arms to stop its clawing. Simultaneously, I tried to close its mouth with my other hand. Meow, meow, it screamed again. The pussy snapped at my hand with its teeth. I stretched my hands to reach its nape so I could lift the creature off me. I'd never seen a beast move like that. The feline whirled, flipping itself around and flopping on top of my right hand. I glared at the clock. Time edged closer to 7:30. That cat had resolved to keep its prey, my hand, in prison, so it was a case of self-defense. I swung my knee and let Pussy have it in the jaws. Meow, meow, meow! The beast wailed akin to the air raid siren in war movies about the London bombings. Then it spit flames of singed mouth hair breath at me. I coughed and the beast jumped, then scurried out of the room. I glanced at the bed. Yellowbeard sloshed, making his own waves. I sucked in my breath once more, eyeballing him. He swayed on the watery mattress a few more times. Finally he stopped. I crawled up to a light socket, unplugged the radio, crept to my clothes piled ungraciously on the armchair, scooped up my baby blue denim jumpsuit, and sneaked as carefully as possible on all fours into the bathroom. There I tugged my way into the jumpsuit, twisted my hips to avoid falling into Pussy's litter box, and chided myself for getting into such a predicament. I prayed no one was on the 3 streets between Ched's place and mine. The sole makeup I'd be able to wear en route was the blood from the cat's love pats. I hadn't been seen without makeup since age 15, and I had no plans to start facing the world with a naked face. Nevertheless, that morning I was willing to make concessions. When I tiptoed through the bedroom, I glimpsed Ched. The alcohol anesthetic hadn't yet worn off. I realized I had a little time to do so, but I had to scan his flat to sort out how I'd been snared into the strange situation. Was something about the decor alluring? Large beige tapestries printed in maroon paisley designs with tiny curlicues masked his picture window and sprawled across the walls. They darkened the place, and that must have been when it enticed me. The tapestries gave his flat a mysterious Mideastern aura. His place also exuded the atmosphere of a palm reader's den, one of those dark clapboard houses with shingles flapping in the wind and signs sporting huge red hands. So the ambiance was kind of strange and exciting, and well, it made Ched seem kind of exciting, especially when he acted so enraptured with me. Plus, his flat contained 4 huge aquariums that served as centerpieces in the middle of his living room. That guy was a fish fanatic, much like John LaRoche, Chris Cooper's character in Adaptation, had once been. Of course, back then I didn't connect it with John LaRoche because Charlie Kaufman hadn't written Adaptation yet. In fact, Susan Orlean, Meryl Streep's character, hadn't written The Orchid Thief or even the New Yorker features about LaRoche yet. So there I was, caught in a net of the prototype for a Charlie Kaufman character years before he wrote the screenplay around him. Nevertheless, Ched's fish infatuation gave me reason to psychoanalyze him, especially with me being a poet and all. The spidery guy lived in this mysterious dark den with all sorts of fish in 4 huge aquariums, hatchetfish, angelfish, black-skirted tetras, bettas, and some cardinals. A fat black fish he'd named Esmeralda swished in a tank by herself. So Ched was a fisherman of sorts. But he didn't eat the fish. Instead, he collected them and kept them in cages. Might he be trying to hook and cage me, too?